So you may not have noticed, but these are some tense and polarizing times we are living in. So I just want to forewarn you that this sermon may make you uncomfortable or unhappy, depending on where you are at with what is going on in our country. And I can actually see it making different people unhappy for different reasons, which is not a bad quality for a sermon to have. But if something that happens today does make you uncomfortable or unhappy or what have you, I always welcome dialogue. So please do reach out. I would be happy to hear about it. Our worship theme for January is struggle and freedom. And this is the last service I'm giving on this theme this month. And next Sunday, we are pleased to welcome Melita Carter from the Peace Learning Center. She's going to talk about economic empowerment for youth, particularly youth from under-resourced communities, and how they can discover their own entrepreneurial power, which is an important way of creating freedom for themselves in their own lives. This being the last sermon on the topic of freedom and struggle for me, I was delighted to see that Linda had chosen the song Take Down These Walls for the choir anthem, and I want to thank Linda, and I want to thank the choir, and I want to thank Jamie Fenner for the beautiful music today. Let's give them a hand. And I want to open with a prayer today, or a plea, or a supplication, or an I don't know what to I don't know who, but this is a prayer that walls come down. To begin with, this is a prayer for each and any beautiful spirit that feels walled up or walled in. This is a prayer that walls go down that have been built around us, sometimes from childhood, sometimes walls we have even helped build ourselves. This is a prayer for anyone who was ever told that they were not enough. Not enough because they were a girl, or not enough because of the color of their skin, or not enough because of the holes in their shoes or the hole in their family. Not enough because if I mattered, I would not be hungry. Not enough because if we mattered, my mother would not be scared. Not enough because boys don't wear dresses. Not enough because that doesn't happen to good girls. Not enough because God is angry. Not enough because depression is a sin. Not enough because a cousin served time, or a father served time, or we ourselves served time. Not enough because of how we talk, or what we eat, or who we love. This is a prayer for every beautiful tiger that was ever caught up in a cage. May the walls come tumbling down, and may you know your own beauty and your fierceness and your power. This weekend, just yesterday, we saw in the streets so many beautiful lions and tigers, so many people who have often and ordinarily been pushed away from the centers of power, taking back that center, claiming public spaces, taking the public stage for themselves and for their communities. So many people claiming their power and their fierceness. So many people demanding in righteous anger that we take down these walls. Because there are walls being built right now that demand our attention. There are walls being built to keep immigrants, and by immigrants I mean black and brown immigrants, out of our country, and to keep refugees out of our country and Muslims out of our country. There are walls being built to fence us off from the world and to militarize our borders. But that's just one set of walls. There are walls being built around Planned Parenthood centers and health clinics and hospitals and even doctors' offices to separate women and people with uteruses from the entire gamut of reproductive health services, including the right to a safe and legal abortion. There are walls being built to keep transgender people out of the military and to keep transgender children out of school bathrooms where they just want to use the bathroom in relative safety and dignity. There are walls being built around poor families. Walls to separate the neediest and the most vulnerable in our society from social services they depend on, like Medicaid and SNAP and Meals on Wheels. Walls separating people from food and health care. There are walls being built to lock up more black and brown bodies, to detain more immigrants, to separate families. Some of these walls are new, and some of these walls are very old as this country. And we're just shoring them up and building them higher now. And so there are people out in the streets this weekend demanding with righteous anger, take down these walls. And this is a holy anger. There is a Franciscan blessing that says, may you be blessed with anger. May you be blessed with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. There are some things we should be angry about. When people are denied dignity, when people are denied freedom, when people are denied health care or voting rights, we should be angry. And I chose the poem Revenge by Elisa Chavez for a reading today because it expresses that righteous anger so well and so clearly. And it is in its own way a prayer, a defiant insistence that in the end we will take down these walls. You cannot deport our minds. We will not hold funerals for our potential. We have always been what makes America great. But the thing about righteous anger is there's no shortage of that going around these days. And that is an understatement. We might even say there's a surplus of anger in this country. And everyone thinks that their anger is righteous anger. Whether I might call it righteous anger from the perspective of my values. And we all have different lists that we're carrying around of the things that we are righteously angry at. And in our anger and our righteousness, we are walled off from one another. And so our prayer today is not finished because there is another wall we need to take down. This past week, I was taking an intensive class at Christian Theological Seminary on the subject of entrepreneurial leadership, 8 to 4:30 every day. And as part of this class, we were reading a well-known book on multicultural leadership to learn how to incorporate leadership values of different communities into our own leadership style. And we were given an assignment, which was to partner up with someone who was different from us in some way. And we were supposed to go over one of the chapters of the book and present it to the group. Outline all of the important points in the chapter, and then also reflect on sort of what we had learned from our partner in the process. Now, I'm a good student, if I do say so myself, but I'm a good student in a way that sometimes makes me not so good a student. So there were 5 groups at the table, and we all agreed that we weren't really feeling this well-known book about multicultural leadership. It was okay. And my partner and I agreed that our chapter that we had been assigned, there wasn't a lot to it. But that was the assignment that we had. So we got together, we went through the chapter, I made my little bulleted list, and we had a handout. And we talked a little bit about our traditions, and I did learn some things from her that I took away. But mostly I was just glad that this assignment was pretty easy and only took about a half an hour, because at the end of the day, these intensives are intense. And when an easy assignment comes your way, you're pretty okay with that. Okay. So we presented our assignment, and it was fine. One of the other teams at the table, and I'm not including any names here, they were really on the surface a very mismatched pair. One of them was a youngish African-American pastor. He was serving, an urban evangelical black church. And the other was a much older white guy who was serving 2 very small Methodist congregations out in rural Indiana, super Trump country for sure. So they were very different communities. That's not a slur, that's just an observation, right? They're very different communities. And like the rest of us, these 2 people weren't really feeling this book. So unlike me and my partner, they just kind of threw it away. And instead, the African-American pastor invited the white pastor to come visit his church. They left CTS, they drove to his church, and he said, come meet my people. And they spent 2 hours in deep conversation at his church. They learned each other's life story. And what they learned was that they had far more similarities than differences in their lives. They had struggled with some of the same issues in their personal lives. They had faced similar challenges growing up in very different contexts. They had similar ideas about what it meant to pastor. They had similar hopes and dreams for their communities, and their communities faced similar challenges too. So they could really understand and resonate with each other, and that is what they presented to the group on. I've been in school for a long time, said the older white pastor. I've read thousands of pages. I've written I don't even know how many papers. And in a year, I'm going to forget everything I read in this book, he said. But I'm going to take the conversation we had with me for the rest of my life. It changed me, he said. It changed me. And his counterpart agreed, and now they're making plans for him to come visit this gentleman's 2 churches in rural Indiana. So I got the assignment done, but they had a transformational moment. And the transformational moment came from listening deeply and discovering the shared humanity of the other person in their story. So there's a Unitarian Universalist minister named Robin Bartlett who has joint standing in the UUA and also the United Church of Christ. And she's a fairly new minister at this mid-sized, multi-denominational Christian church in Sterling, Massachusetts. And in the recent UU World article, you can find it online, she talks a little bit about her church and her work in it, especially as a fairly new person coming into this church. She writes, I serve a mid-sized and thriving Christian UU church, Christian Unitarian Universalist Church, that is federated with the United Church of Christ and the American Baptist Churches USA, out in rural Sterling, Massachusetts. She says, we have progressive Christians, we have recovering Catholics, atheists, agnostics, we have folks who believe that there's no way to be saved except through the blood of Jesus Christ. This kind of theological diversity, she says, is not for everyone. But the hard thing about my settlement in Sterling, she said, is not the theological diversity, it's the ideological diversity. Sterling is a deep red rural farm town that Trump won. While liberals are attracted to our church on the town green with its rainbow flag, so are conservatives. It's the only mainline Protestant church in our small town. We have the beautiful problem of being stuck together. I want to highlight that last line. We have the beautiful problem of being stuck together. So she continues, the political diversity in my congregation was a shock to my system, to be honest, but is the only church I've served in which I feel that I really get to live the dream of Unitarian Universalism, which is radical pluralism. I stand in a pulpit every week and prophesy love. I'm preaching that we need to love one another, including across political differences. Tribalism got us into this mess, and it's not going to get us out, I tell them. I tell them that no matter how we voted, we must now stand for black lives, for our children, for women, for Muslims, Latinos, queer people, and for each other. We cried together, and then we chalked the whole town with messages of love for our neighbors. She says we are learning to listen to one another, searching not always for agreement, but for understanding. And she said, no one leaves unchanged. She concludes, this is the good news of universalism. This is the scandal of universalism, that we must continuously choose to expand our concept of love until it is as wasteful and extravagant as we can make it. Until we include the least, the last, and the lost, but also include whoever we are currently referring to as snowflake or deplorable, instead of the true name for all of us, which is beloved. So if we are serious about our Unitarian Universalist values, there is another wall that must ultimately come down, and it is the wall that has separated us into snowflakes and deplorables, the wall that has been built around us and between us, separating us from our shared humanity. And for this wall to come down, we have to learn again how to talk to each other and how to listen. In Robin Bartlett's ministry, she often issues a challenge to her congregation. Find someone who you know you disagree with on some issue. Maybe it's gun control, maybe it's the environment, whatever it is, and go out to coffee with them and sit down and have a conversation. Share your personal stories. talk about the issues you disagree on with the agreement that you're not trying to convert each other, you're not trying to win an argument, you're not trying to change someone's mind. You're just trying to really hear each other. And in this process, listen for the shared values and the shared concerns, but mostly listen for the shared humanity. We should approach one another with a holy curiosity, and listen for the way that we are each named beloved. This does not mean we do not need to resist. It does not mean that I think everything is relative and all sides are equally valid on every issue. I think human dignity is never up for debate. And I'm not saying that our political disagreements can all be resolved by talking to each other, because that isn't how it works. And in fact, sometimes conversations will just clarify how deeply we are in conflict with one another. And if we're going to make real change, we can't be afraid of that. We can't be afraid of conflict. If we're going to bring more justice into the world, we have to get over our allergy that we have of creating discomfort. But conflict and discomfort and communication and relationship can all happen at the same time. And believe me, it goes against all of my Midwestern training to say that. The conflict and discomfort doesn't mean you stop talking or you leave the room. It means you stay in relationship and stay in communication. So I will pass this challenge on to you. Find someone you disagree with on some issue and have a conversation and learn each other's story. Now there's a practical side to this. We need to hear one another's stories to learn how to better talk to one another about the things that we care about. We never know where someone's heart is and what opportunities there actually are to work with them. And we might be surprised, and we need to work together, because we're not going to solve global hunger or the environmental crisis or the opioid crisis without working together. At the end of his presidency, George W. Bush said the thing that he was most proud of was his global initiative to combat AIDS in Africa. You want to talk about an unlikely coalition? How about a Republican president, AIDS activists, and evangelical Christians working together across their differences to save millions of lives in Africa? Common ground is possible, and neither side has a monopoly on good ideas or worthy objectives. Ultimately, we need to learn to listen to one another and love each other through this moment. This is a confusing and messy and difficult and painful time in our nation's history. This is also a time when I think that significant progress can be made. Stories are being heard, people are speaking up, but it is going to be birthed out of conflict. The progress that we make is going to involve conflict. And our UU values say that we are called to love one another through it. We are called to hold on to each other's humanity, even as we may be resisting their plans and their programs. No one ever promised that Unitarian Universalism was going to be easy. I want to close today with a blessing that was offered to us yesterday by the president of CTS to close out our leadership class. It is a Christian blessing. It is called the Fourfold Franciscan Blessing. So recognizing that we are all coming from different theological perspectives here, you may have to do a little bit of translating into your own theology, as I myself did. But this is the blessing. May God bless you with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that you may live deep within your heart. May God bless you with righteous anger. Righteous anger. At injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless you with tears to shed for those who suffer from pain, rejection, starvation, and war, so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them and to turn their pain into joy. And may God bless you with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in this world so that you can do what others claim cannot be done. Amen, and blessed be.